He was a police officer. He was arrested by his own agency. He says wrongfully. And he filed a lawsuit against them and received a settlement. He's here to tell his story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Content is from Northern Virginia. We have Ian Murray on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Ian is a former police officer, and he is also a military veteran, and he's a defense contractor for the United States government. And he is, well, let's just be blunt. He's one of those guys that got caught up. He got arrested wrongfully so by his agency and filed a lawsuit. They settled out of court, and we will talk about that in a moment. Ian, first of all, thanks for your service. Secondly, thanks for being a guest on the show and talking about this. It's very much appreciated.
Yes, sir. Just to clarify, I was a corrections officer, not a police officer.
Corrections officer, police officer, pretty much the same thing in my book.
Okay.
They're all first responders. So you were a corrections officer and I want to clarify something. The sheriff's office in Jacksonville, Florida. Am I correct?
That's correct.
But you're a corrections officer, and they have police officers working in the sheriff's department. It's one of the few they have elected. Instead of a police chief, they have a sheriff. And it's a political thing. But when we talk about police officers, corrections officers, they have more rights quite often than sheriff's deputies do. Am I wrong on that count?
I'm not sure about that. It just depends on the nature of the department. I've worked for two different departments, and there is a big contrast between the corrections officers and the police department police officers. Yeah.
And by the way, we've had some phenomenal guests on the show that are retired police officers from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and they did phenomenal stories. Check out the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and you'll find it. And be sure to go to our website, letradio.com. Here's one thing that I've got to get off my chest, and I still carry, this is a bit of a true confession, I still carry some of this. Back in the day, when a police department arrested an officer, or a sheriff's department arrested an officer, I automatically assumed they did something wrong. And I still carry some of that with me today. And I still have that initial reaction, no, not going there. Doesn't mean I cover up for them. It just means I don't want to talk to them. But I've since learned, and probably towards the end of my career, I learned the hard way that quite often what you hear is not the truth. And that's the case with you, isn't it?
Very much so. Yes, sir.
Where you were actually arrested by your agency.
Correct.
What were you charged with?
Well, they tried charging me with official misconduct and grand theft, if I remember correctly.
That's a pretty heavy charge. Grand theft is a felony in most states.
It was, yeah. That was it was a felony charge.
And here's the thing, and before we get into Ian's story, when you get arrested and convicted of a felony, a lot of things change for you. Misdemeanors, not so much. It's really about your time, your punishment, paying back your debt to society. But when you are a felon, man, everything changes. And when they have what they call a crime of moral turpitude, meaning theft, and you are a convicted felon and you're convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, man, that can really harm you when it comes to applying for new jobs.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you encountered some of that with just the accusations.
Yes, I have. It's something I'm still having to answer to occasionally from time to time, depending on what kind of work I'm doing and when my clearance comes up for renewal and stuff like that.
How long ago was this that you were arrested?
It's been over 10 years now. It happened in 2014.
And before we get into the details of what happened, I got to ask you this, and I already know the answer. Have you gotten, the settlement aside, have you gotten a public apology, a clearance, any kind of exculpatory thing, he didn't do anything wrong type statement from them?
Nope.
That's the thing that irritates me to no end.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say this, it's not just your case, Ian. When police, and I'm going to use that term, sheriff's deputies, state troopers, corrections officers, when they do something phenomenal, whether they save lives, whether they go above beyond the call of duty, they stand tall in a gunfight, these departments don't talk about them. They don't sing their accolades. They don't talk about that stuff. But when somebody does something wrong, or there is the allegation of doing something wrong, they're the first ones to throw them under the bus, and they never even, most of them, will never even say we were wrong.
Nope.
And I cannot, not just your case, but I cannot get them to do that. I finally gave up in my own case of trying to get that to happen, and it's been a long time.
Yes, it's very frustrating. I agree, because that would have been, I mean, we when I was in the academy with this department, we sat through hours of ethics lectures, and they always said, if you make a mistake, own up to it. You know, the consequences will be a lot less severe, but apparently that was a rules for thee and not for me type thing coming from the administration. Yeah, well, that's the thing. And by the way, there's different administration in there now, so I don't want to cast aspersions on the present administration. Before we go into details of your story, were the so-called investigators involved in your arrest, did they receive any disciplinary action? Not that I'm aware of. And you would not be aware of it. They wouldn't tell you, would they? No. In fact, my lawyer told me that it was very unlikely that would happen. But the only solace I got out of this was, to my understanding, they've made massive policy revisions to how they conduct internal investigations, particularly dealing with military leave, based off my case. And that's what yours was about, military leave. You were military reserve at the time, right? Or National Guard? Both. I don't understand the difference between the two. The National Guard is a state-run. It's part of the military, but it's state-run versus federal government-run. And when I was hired on with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in 2009, I was currently in the National Guard at that time. And in 2012, when my contract expired, I transitioned into the reserve side of the house, which is part of what we call the big army, federal-funded main army. So I was in both components while working for the Sheriff's Department. Got you. And they somehow suspected that you were misleading or stealing with your military leave. And is there another way of putting it? More or less, yeah. And it's almost impossible from my perspective to do that, because I had to furnish orders for every day I took off when it came to my military leave. So here's the thing. We've had, I just tell you in my career, we've had officers that were deployed to combat zones as part of Army Reserve, and their jobs were held from them. They weren't paid by the agency. It's not like you were double dipping, but your job, you didn't face punitive action. Has that changed since then? It depends on the job. I did have an issue with one of my in my current profession. We had the company I was working for up here in Northern Virginia. I was sent to Germany for a while, and while I was over there, it wasn't really a combat tour, but it was an overseas assignment where I was on active duty. Right. The government, for whatever reason, decided they didn't want me working on that particular contract anymore. So the company I was working for calls and says, well, yeah, they don't want you on the contract anymore. I said, well, fine. What job are you going to have for me to come back to when I come off military duty? And they said, well, we don't have one. And I said, well, you have to have one. We're going to turn more of that conversation when we take a short break. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're talking with Ian Murray. His website is ianmurray.net. It's IANMURRAY.net. When we return, we're going to talk more about the details of his wrongful arrest and how it impacted his life and career.
Are you over 70 with a life insurance policy you no longer need or can't afford to keep? You can turn it into cash. Get more information with no obligation at letsavings.com. That's letsavings.com, letsavings.com, or call 866-480-4252. Again, that's 866-480-4252.
This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Returning our conversation with Ian Murray. He is a former, and I'm using that term, and I'll explain the difference, former corrections officer for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, now a defense contractor in Northern Virginia. He is also U.S. Army Reserve, and he was wrongfully arrested by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office when he's an employee of theirs as a corrections officer, which we'll talk about in a few moments. His website is ianmurray.net. That's IANMURRAY.net. For when to break, Ian, you talked about since then being deployed overseas, I believe it was Germany and Europe, and it caused some friction with your current employment, didn't it?
Yeah, well, not my current employment, but it was the company I was working for. They were trying to relieve me of my job while I was on active orders, and I reminded them. I was kind of surprised because the agency we were contracted for was a agency that supports military operations worldwide, and everyone was kind of shocked. And needless to say, I had to call the JAG officer over in Germany near where I was stationed and inform him of the situation. And within a day or two, they were able to secure me having a job for when I got home.
Yeah. Well, it's the right thing to do. It really is. Mm-hmm. Well, and this happens and I hate to say it, it happens in police departments, and it happens in private corporations. It happens in defense contractors. When these men and women get deployed and they're reservists, quite often, not only is their life on the line, but their whole financial future is on the line. And that's just not right.
Absolutely.
We have laws in place with active duty deployed people and finances and loans and repossessions, all that stuff, because of horrendous things that occurred. But I want to go into your story. You were working as a corrections officer for Jacksonville, Florida Sheriff's Office, and things were pretty much normal. And you deployed with the Military Reserve or the National Guard. Am I wrong?
I was never deployed with them, but there were times when I went on some short active duty assignments for training and whatnot.
Well, how did they wind up getting on their radar saying you did something wrong and arrested you?
Well, what happened was I had a lieutenant, a watch commander, who apparently had a dislike for me on a personal level.
Aha!
And
you were the golden child.
I was not.
No, neither was I.
I was very far from a golden child. If I had been a golden child, this would have never happened.
So this shift lieutenant had an axe to grind with you. You had some kind of personal dispute.
Correct, and I don't even really know what it was, to be honest with you.
It doesn't really matter? Because in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter what caused it. It just was there.
Correct.
So what happened?
Well, there was a time where we were scheduled to go to drill. I had orders. I'd turned them in, been approved for the time off, and it was when the government shutdowns started happening. This was in 2014, and there was one particular day where we had orders, but we didn't actually have to report into our reserve center because of the government shutdown. But it was made very clear that, as always, you have orders. Make sure you're available to the military. If something changes, we'll let you know. But as of right now, we're standing by to see what happens. And that was not the first time in my career that something like that had ever happened, so I didn't think too much of it. Several months later, I got an updated drill calendar for the rest of the fiscal year. I submitted it to the watch commander and adjusted all the future dates. She called me into her office and asked me about that particular weekend because they had taken the one day off the calendar. And I explained the situation to her, and she at that point ordered me to change that day from a military leave day to a personal leave day or a vacation day. And I was a little confused because I had orders, and so I went to my full-time staff and my first sergeant at my Army unit, explained it to them, and they're like, yeah, you had orders, but if that's your civilian employer's policy, You should go along with them because you don't want to get in trouble through your job. And I said, all right. So I called someone up higher up in the sheriff's department. I forget who it was, but it's someone who'd been there for 30 years. I remember that much. And explained the situation, and they pretty much said the same thing. They're like, yeah, if you had orders, you're fine, but if your lieutenant's ordering you to do this, you should do it because you may get written up for insubordination. This lieutenant was known for just writing people up whenever she could. She was very, ham-fisted that way. So the next day, she calls me into her office again with my sergeant, and again reiterates this order to me. So I complied with her order. I went in the leave system, went back to several months, withdrew the military leave day, resubmitted it as an annual leave day, and before I even got back to my desk, she denied that request she told me to make. And come to find out, that was the kind of final piece of ammo, I guess, she needed in her arsenal to file the complaint against me that she did with our with the integrity division, if you want to call them that.
Right.
But I found out through my military command about a week later she'd filed a criminal complaint or a criminal allegation against me through the internal or integrity division with the sheriff's office.
Did you have anything that would indicate to you that there was trouble on the horizon?
Not to this level, no.
Here's the thing, and I want people to understand, departmentally, facing charges doesn't mean much. You could when you talk about the crimes of moral turpitude, it's a different thing. When you face criminal charges, it is a total different ball of wax. But having administrative charges, insubordination, whatever it might be, quite often they're dismissed and no one even knows the outcome of them because there's nothing to it. But yours went further from the administrative charges, didn't it?
Correct.
What happened?
Well, this investigation went on for a while. I really don't know what they did as far as the investigation goes. I contacted a lawyer within the FOP and explained the situation to him. And I talked to the FOP president, and they both said, yeah, you didn't do anything wrong. If you had orders, I showed them copies of the orders. They're like, yeah, you're fine. The detectives will do their jobs. You'll get cleared, and it'll just be another day at work. I said, cool. So I went to work, did my job. There was at one point where the detectives called me and started, asking me some questions. I think they wanted me to come in for questioning. I called the same lawyer. The lawyer said, well, you don't really need to go in. All your orders are on file. So I called the detective back, said, hey, all my orders are on file. If you can't find them, call me. I'll email them, fax them to you, whatever. I'll even come hand deliver them if you need me to. And he said, okay, thanks, and hung up the phone, and that was the last I'd heard of him until I was arrested.
And when you were arrested, what did they arrest you at home or at work, or what happened?
Yeah, yes. I was about to go on an active duty assignment for 3 months, and this is when the investigation had been going on for about 4 months, and apparently they only had 6 months of jurisdictional authority, or I guess is what it's called, where they could, they either had to take action or drop it. So if they'd waited till I'd come back from my active duty assignment, they wouldn't have been able to take any kind of action.
Right. Statute of limitations. We're talking with Ian Murray. He is a former corrections officer for Jacksonville, Florida Sheriff's Office. He was arrested, wrongfully so. He wound up filing suit against the agency in the city. They settled and still waiting to be exonerated. When we return, we'll talk more about his arrest and what happened and what life has been since then. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere, I promise you. We'll be right back. Here's your chance to get into the ground floor, to make a donation to make the movie Gun Runner, based off of the true story of now retired police detective Maria Oliveira, who shot 6 times while investigating a crime, died 3 times, brought back to life, has been in a hospital for a month, rushed back to work, only to suffer a near-fatal heart attack, and then several months later, a near-fatal stroke. It talks about his recovery, his life after, and more. That's at gunrunnerfilm.com. Again, you can make a donation at gunrunnerfilm.com.
Imagine earning an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more from the comfort of your home or business, all with Facebook. That's right. Meta is paying people just like you every month. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return conversation with Ian Murray on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Ian is a former corrections officer for Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in Florida. He was wrongfully arrested regarding his military leave. He wound up filing suit against the city, the agency. They settled. That's important, but he's still waiting to be exonerated, which is probably never going to happen. His website is ianmurray.net. That's IANMURRAY.net. We're with their break in. You're talking about, and by the way, you're a contractor now for the United States government in Northern Virginia.
Correct. You're
talking about before we went to break, you were getting arrested. This happened where you were shipping out or going to drill or at work or at home or home before you left for military deployment.
I was at home. It was before I was. It was a afternoon. It was the weekend before I was supposed to ship out for a stateside training assignment up in New England, and I'd taken a couple days off prior to this to spend some time with my family. I was married at the time, and we had some of the family kids come over and whatnot. And I was just preparing. I was literally sitting in my living room. I think I was packing clothes to go on this trip coming up. That's when the arrest happened. I live in Nassau County, Florida, outside of Jacksonville, and it was, the last thing, honestly, I was expecting that day to happen, but it did.
And they just showed up your door and they said, we have a warrant for your arrest, and took you off?
Yep. Yes, they. My garage door to my house was open, and they walked into my garage up to that door that separates the house from the garage, knocked on the door. I thought it was maybe a friend of mine coming over to say hi, because most people that don't know me would have gone to the front door, I would have thought.
Right.
But I get up, I walk through the kitchen, open the door, and there's 4 gentlemen standing there wearing half tactical gear. And I'm looking at them like, can I help you guys with something? And one of them asked, are you Corrections Officer Murray? I said, yeah. And they grabbed me, handcuffed me, and said, we had a warrant for your arrest. I started chuckling. I thought it was a joke at first.
Right.
Like my friends at work were maybe just playing a going away prank, because a lot of them knew I was under this investigation before. And I thought since it'd been so long since I'd been contacted, I thought it had all been resolved, but apparently they just let it sit on their desk for a while until they found out I was leaving to go on this training assignment. So, they perp walked me down my own driveway. One of them, they all went in my house. One of them even, I heard him use the bathroom. He went back to my back bathroom, and they took me and put me in their car, and I called my wife at the time, told her what was happening, and even she couldn't believe it. So,
right. To be honest with you, I'm having trouble believing it, because this is not supposed to happen.
No, it's not supposed to happen. Yeah, I mean, if the news headlines didn't exist, I don't think anyone would believe about it either.
And the thing is, I've never done anything to warrant being arrested for as an adult. As a child, maybe it's a different story. As an adult, never. But that doesn't mean you don't have the nightmares of being arrested by your own agency. And we all kind of live with that. And here's the general scenario. It's like you wind up having to use force, and there's political pressure and all these other things, and you may not be wrong. You may have done everything right, and you still wind up facing criminal charges. That's something that happens far too often across the United States. But we're talking about accusations of theft, felony theft, and you're like, what are you talking about? I'd be flabbergasted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was it was a shocker, I'll say the least. But when they got me down to their little substation, and it wasn't just that one day of leave I mentioned earlier. Like, they apparently they had several other days. I mentioned earlier I transitioned from the Army and National Guard to the Army Reserves. There was 3 days where I had to go in to MEPS, the military processing station, and I had orders for that too, and apparently they didn't have the orders for that. Like, their whole argument was, well, these orders weren't on your drill calendar, and I'm like, are you kidding me right now? And I reminded them all my orders were on file with the records department or the watch commander, whoever kept track of my leave. And then, of course, they started making excuses that I could have been more cooperative and this and that, and
well, isn't it typical we turn around and say blame the victim when you didn't do anything wrong?
More or less, that's pretty much what they did. But so yeah, after the interview, they took me down to the main jail where I'd worked. One of my friends was actually working the booking department. He was a sergeant at the time. He allowed me to make a couple phone calls. They made sure to try and keep me shielded from the public eye as much as possible. Unfortunately, it was this point we found out that the detectives had gone to the news media and sold the false narrative to them. And they ran it all over the local news during drive time. It was about 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon at this point. My wife had to come down and post a $1,500 cash bond to get me out of the jail, so I didn't have to spend the night in jail.
Right.
And as we're driving home from the jail, I'm getting phone calls from my members of my military unit asking me what the heck's going on, because they'd heard about it on the news. Like,
right.
That's how my military command found out about this. They couldn't believe it. And they knew the investigation was going on, and they were very furious because this obviously was disrupting my training, which I was about to have to go on to, and no one had ever come by the military unit at this point to talk to them or ask them questions or anything. So, like, we were all very curious as to what was actually done through this investigation, which gave them probable cause to arrest me.
Well, the term probable cause, just so people know, you have a reasonable suspicion to stop someone. Probable cause is more than reasonable suspicion, but not always enough evidence can make someone in court to arrest them. It's purposely vague. But if you ask me, there's not a whole lot of probable cause because you have written orders. You've got documents that say, I need this time off.
Correct.
Where is the slam dunk red ball? Oh, my God, he did it. We're arresting this guy now. Where is that?
Well, there wasn't any, and the whole thing from the get-go was very weak. One big red flag I noticed from the night I was arrested was I've seen officers in the department get arrested before. Unfortunately, like you mentioned before, it happens.
Right.
Almost always. I think every time I'd ever seen someone get arrested, they did a press conference outside the police memorial building with one of the undersheriffs or the chiefs or somebody, and they would give a statement to the media outlining the arrest and everything like that. And they did not do that with me. Nobody wanted to go on, put their face in front of the news cameras.
That's saying a lot because the bosses love to get on TV cameras.
Yeah, nobody wanted to get on TV with this one. So like that from right there, I knew there was like, they did this very haphazardly. And unfortunately, historically they played the odds because when this happens so many times, what happens is usually the person who's being arrested, what they do is they plaster you all over the media. They suspend you without pay, so you're left without a paycheck.
And by the way, I'm going to interrupt here. When that happens, when people are suspended without pay, I don't know whether you had children at the time, you lose all your benefits, including insurance and health insurance for your children. That's the thing that people don't understand. Oh, it's not a big deal. You get a vacation, you don't get paid. No, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, I mean, in my situation, I did nothing wrong, but then you see police officers who were involved in shootings, and they're not always good shootings, and they get put on leave with pay, and they do get to go on vacation, even if later on they're found guilty of being in a bad shooting. They get to keep all that money and have kept all their benefits and everything that whole time.
Well, here's the thing, and we're going to take a short break in just a moment. We're talking with Ian Murray. Ian is a former corrections officer of Jacksonville, Florida Sheriff's Office. He is a defense contractor, and he was part of the military reserve, Army Reserve, and he was arrested, wrongfully so. When we return, we're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk about the lawsuit, how they settled, as many details as he can. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. His website, by the way, is ianmurray.net. That's IANMURRAY.net. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to take a short break. I promise you, we'll be right back. If you do any business on social media, creating content is one thing. The trick is, how do you turn those people that comment on your social media into consumers? There's a great tool, and you can get more information at letpops.com. That's letpops.com. Best of all, you can get started for free. letpops.com. Check it out today.
Got questions about your Medicare coverage? Who doesn't? Take a few moments to get real answers and options, all for free. Call 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. Or visit lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com to learn more.
Return conversation with Ian Murray on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Ian, his content is from Northern Virginia. He is a former Jacksonville, Florida Sheriff's Office corrections officer. He was arrested, wrongfully so, regarding his military leave, which we'll talk about more in a few moments. His website is ianmurray.net. That's IANMURRAY.net. Earlier in the conversation, Ian, you said, when I was married. Am I assuming you're no longer married?
Correct.
And did this play a part in it?
Oh, I'm sure it did. Yeah, it definitely put a lot of strain on our marriage.
I don't know how it couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the personal thing I was going to ask you is, man, there's something weird that happens, and I always tell people this, and I'm purposely vague about it. The battles and trauma on the street are one thing. The biggest battles and trauma I faced that had the most negative consequences were from my own agency and the admin staff.
Right.
Is that fair with you?
Yes, and unfortunately, it's pretty much like that everywhere. Being military police, and in both departments I worked for on the civilian side, I always had more problems within my own agency than I did with the elements of doing my job, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense to me, and you're preaching to the choir. And I don't want to get into what command staff does or doesn't do, because that's an issue for 10 or 15 shows. But I do want to focus more on your story. You talked about, I'm sure that this played havoc with your personal relationship, and you two wound up splitting up and becoming divorced, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have children at the time when this occurred?
No, we never had children.
Okay. If there's one saving grace, is that.
Yes.
How long did it take you to because it is a long process with the courts to file suit against the city and the agency?
Oh, very long time. I think we ended up filing the lawsuit. It was around 2019, early part of 2019, after my divorce had been final and I'd gotten back from my first deployment, and they drug the investigation out. There was a second investigation through internal affairs that, just in an effort for them to, try and save face. But yeah, it drug out for a very long time. And then even after we filed the lawsuit, it took another, I want to say probably at least 3-4 years, to get it finally settled.
And I'm sure they settled reluctantly, and we won't go into details of that, but you had pending criminal charges. Did you go to court or did they drop it?
Yeah, it was dropped. In fact, from what my lawyers told me, they didn't even, the state attorney didn't even do charging paperwork for the charges. Like, he looked at the case and even had his doubts, and he gave them another 2 months after my arrest to try and dig up more dirt, which they did more investigating probably the week after the arrest, when I hired a private lawyer, because the union lawyer pretty much turned on me and was more or less going to look out for the sheriff's office, we found out. But yeah, we ended up fighting it, of course, and I knew from the get-go I did nothing wrong. My military command even assured me of that, and they went toe-to-toe with me and fought against the sheriff's office. And so the state attorney never even charged me with a crime. They tried to save face with an administrative investigation, which the detective falsely identified himself as a military investigator throughout the course of his investigation. The undersheriff got involved and initiated a harassment campaign against my ex-wife and I, and we still ended up winning all that. We were about to go to civil service. They settled on that part before it went to hearing. So yeah, we did the same thing with the lawsuit. We just kept going and going until finally, in the end, we ended up getting a settlement out of them. And the only defense they had at the very end was the detectives basically played dumb.
Yeah. And here's the question I'm sure a lot of people have. We think that, okay, there's lawsuits involved, there's settlement, and you're on, fat and easy street, and life is great after that. That was not the case for you, was it?
No, it was not. I mean, the money I ended up losing through this whole thing, having to, be without work and paying a lawyer and everything, I still lost a tremendous amount of money over this whole thing.
not to mention sleep, not to mention you're married, not to mention peace of mind.
Correct.
I don't know about you, Ian. For me, having peace and quiet is one of the number one priorities for me and my wife.
Oh, I agree.
And I would imagine after having the sheriff's department at your door arresting you, that kind of, how do you get that back?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can, but, it's just, I've tried to take positives away from this. It was horrible for me, but at least maybe they'll think twice, after making all the policy revisions, maybe they'll think twice before doing it to somebody else. Because I was informed by people within the sheriff's office when this whole thing was going on that they have done this to people and gotten away with it because people can't fight back against them.
I'm glad you said that. Here's what happens, and this goes to the hierarchy of ex, and I know your corrections officer, but ex-police, former police, retired police. There's very few things I'll correct people on. If they call me ex, I'll say, no, I'm retired. Former means that you left on good terms. Ex usually means you quit under threat of arrest or you're arrested, but you left in less than honorable circumstances. What happens for a lot of agencies is, I'll say this, they have no case, nothing else, so they get the person to quit under pressure, and they say, well, we couldn't bring charges, but they're no longer employed with the agency. And they think that they're saving face, but they're ruining families. They're ruining lives when the people, in your case, did nothing wrong.
Correct.
And a lot of guys, and that term is not gender specific, a lot of guys will fold under the pressure, just anything to get them to get off my back. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you didn't do that.
No, and that's what they were counting on, unfortunately, but I didn't. And I don't think anybody, I don't even think the lieutenant who started this whole thing expected it to go this far. But from what I've heard, people, like I said, I talked to people who, through this whole ordeal, that had been with the sheriff's office for 25, 30 years, and some of them even said, I've never seen somebody fight back against them this hard
sometimes
before.
That's all you got. And I've got it saying that, look, you play by their rules, and I don't mean this in negative, but it's their rules, it's their sandbox. You got to learn their rules, you got to play by the rules, and if they try to jam you up, you fight them. And if you need to, you fight them in court.
Right.
Because that's the only thing that seems to get a lot of these agencies' attention.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, but that's the thing, and they were so desperate to keep this out of court. I mean, there was even one point about a month after the arrest, they came back to my lawyer and offered to drop everything under the provisions that we just simply agreed not to sue them. So, I mean,
forget it.
They knew from the very get-go they didn't have their ducks in a row, that they'd made a big mistake.
Not only did they have their ducks in a row, they had geese. They had nothing. Right. Look,
right.
And here's the thing: when they settled out of court, then did you get the apology? Did you get the admission that we did something wrong, that you were fine?
I did not.
Do you walk around with that chip on your shoulder? I got something to prove to people I didn't do this still?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, quite frankly, though, the fact that I still have my security clearance, I mean, I kept my security clearance through this whole thing. That's the amazing thing. I mean, when the arrest happened, by policy, they had to flag my security clearance. But while the criminal charges were still pending, like the state attorney had not made the decision to drop them yet, the authority that does security clearances came in and did an investigation, and they went to my command, and they even said, is this some kind of a joke? Like, they couldn't even believe it was happening. And they reinstated my security clearance.
Which is unheard of.
Still going on. Yeah, that is unheard of. As someone who's been in the field of having a security clearance for over a decade now, I can tell you that almost never happens.
By the way, the only people that get security clearances yanked and reinstated usually are politicians. So we're going to wrap things up. Ian, I want to thank you for sharing your story. And I know I can't offer you a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I can't make it all go away. But okay. I'm glad you won that, and you learned to carry yourself with your head held high. The website is ianmurray.net. That's spelled IANMURRAY.net. Ian, thanks so much for your service. Number one, in the military and in Sheriff's Department as well. And also as military police and civilian police, I appreciate it. But secondly, thanks for telling your story on a Law Enforcement Talk Radio show. I'm sure that was not easy for you.
No, it's but I'm hoping maybe it can help somebody else at this point.
A huge thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast version of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show, by the way, which is a nationally syndicated radio show. And we broadcast on over 115 radio stations across the United States to more than 44 million combined population. If you like our show, there's two simple things you can do. Go to our website, letradio.com. Add your favorites. Check it often. You can find episodes of the show right there. And the second one involves our Facebook page. It's so easy to find great content, including past episodes of the show. And when you see something that you like, that resonates with you, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.